Hello, maying adlaw na tong tanan. God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. Karong adlaw mag-react ta sa discussion nila Bishop Barron ug Alex O'Connor. Si Alex O'Connor sa ka batanon nga YouTuber no, nga atheist. Before siya nahimog usa ka atheist usa siya ka Katoliko. Niya sa Kristan pagid siya. Ngano kaming bali ni siya no. So si Bishop Aaron Pud usa ka Catholic bishop nga ilado usab sa iyang mga storya sa YouTube ug siya usab ang gahimo sa Word on Fire Bible. Nga din puno kini og commentary sa mga Kristiyano sa una sama sa mga church fathers or apostolic fathers nga inubanan og mga litrato para mas ma-illustrate ang mga passages sa Bible. Ang video nga itong hatagan og reaction karon kay usa ka segment sa video sa YouTube nga makita na to sa channel ni Alex O'Connor. Yanganlan kini og A Bishop and an Atheist Discuss Meaning Within Reason episode 22. Diri nga segment nga atong gipili, adunay mga pangutana si Alex O'Connor ni Bishop Barron kung ang driver ba nato kay evolutionary drives ra ba no? Kung evolution na ba hinungdan. So atong paminawon.
Now, what do you make of people who say that on an atheistic picture of the universe, what we essentially are as human beings are highly evolved mammals that have slowly developed this accidental consciousness to help us to survive? And so the ultimate motivating factor behind all of our behaviors, even if it's subconscious, would be something just as simple as the drive to survive, the drive to reproduce. Because, of course, somebody's not likely to say this. Some people might reference their children, but on the cognitive level, we might reference having some belief in a set of ideals, but we might say that this is essentially a way that the brain tricks itself into being more likely to survive, because by having these invented ideals, it's more likely to do the work that's going to lead us to survive. And so maybe that's the fundamental value. And I wouldn't characterize it as people worshipping their survival. It would be that this is the motivating factor, and what they're actually worshipping is some invented ideal that just helps to prolong their survival.
I know. I've never found that convincing.
So kung ano, gihatag ni ni Alex O'Connor ning question nga mag-determine kung ano ba evolutionary drives ba, kung evolution na ba niya itong mga hinungdan nga nung gahimo tag mga actions no, kay plausible siya nga makaya na to imagine ba nga ang kalibutan nag-cause ra og kanang evolution no, para mas makatabang nato nga mo survive kung sa terror management theory pa na siya nga kanido kuno nga phenomenon no nga atong pagtuo or kaning mga ingani religion something nga is a cause sa usa ka evolutionary drive kining anxiety nga to na feel nga usahay mangita tag pamaagi nga mahimo tang kuan ba, mahimo maka-escape ta sa death. So mo na iyang belief or kana iyang stand nga iyang ipangutana. So nakoy kanang gisulat diri, basahon na nako kadjot, then akong ihatag ang implications ani. If evolutionary biology alone is what makes us move, then there would be a disconnect. So na-disconnect kay ang atong biology no, it dictates us no, gidiktaran ta sa atong biology nga mangita og meaning og reason no, nga constant nga mangita og meaning og reason, then nga beyond sa evolutionary biology. So ang reason nga atong nga naa nato no, ga-ask ba nga lagi ibutang tala nga ang evolutionary biology mo hinungdan nga nung mo decide tag ingani, na decision, na free will, na consciousness, butang ta lang para makatabang og survival. Pero kung mo stop tag explain diha, no? Mahulog nga ang atong mga instincts uban, apil na mga pangutanaha nga mangutana taahan ang gikan ng biological evolution, no? Mabasura tanan. And if you stop to explain things, then we cease to grow, no? Kung ato nang kay part man ni sa tong biology, we would cease to grow. And when we cease to grow, we die, no? So kung dili na to ma-explain ng mga butanga, dili ta mo grow as individual ug magpuyo ta sa kinabuhi nga meaningless. Ug nga na manggaling, we will die, no? We will die, we can get on with that, pero taas-taas na siya nga reason nga nung mamatay ta. Pero the simple reason is, who really can live in a world like that, no? Nga usahay mugawas na ang selfishness, no? Actually, na-study nga gikandak ana na storya na ni Ben siya, pero sa ilagi pong storya ni Alex O'Connor nga gaingon nga sa statistics, giingon dito nga ang tao nga gatuo nga na sila'y kalabutan sa ilang mga actions, mas na tendency nga mahimo to niya iyang actions kaysa tao nga gatuo nga evolutionary drives ra ang nagpalihok sa iya. So, kung kita mangutana ta sa tong kagalingon, mauna-unaan ba nato nga kaning ang evolutionary biology ba nato magdiktar ka nga makapa-cripple nato og living a meaningful life, no? Kay mo man iyang suggestion nga everything is an illusion, no? Dayon the fact nga ato nang hawiran na nga position, knowing nga uncomfortable ug sad ang iyang conclusions, no? Nga everything is meaningless, meaning nga ikaw mismo nga gawidan na kay free will di ay. Kay kung mutuo tag evolutionary drive, no? Ang aha ni siya gasandig. Unsay gisandigan aning evolutionary drive. Kay gasandig ni siya sa religion ug meaning. Sama sa kung giingon nga kitang mga tawo, we have a tendency, no? A tendency to ask questions. Kung gasugod tanan, mga nga na existential questions, no? And since nga di ka mutuwa ng nga nga mas gwapong explanation, then that must mean nga maski pag sad ang imong gipili, then you have free will, no? You had a free will nga imo nang imuuna siya nga desisyon. Nga maski pag nay mas gwapong explanation, both are plausible explanations, pero mas mulin on ka sa mas sad, that should explain nga you have a free will to do so. Okay, otherwise if mo follow lang ka sa imong evolutionary drive, then you should lean on religion. So continue ta, no?
To me, that's just hopelessly reductionistic. I mean, to take Hamlet and say somehow I can reduce that to the survival instinct, or I can read Plato's Republic and say, well, that's finally all about the survival instinct or the Divine Comedy. To me, it's hopelessly reductionistic. Is something like bodily survival, basic instincts, ingredient probably in everything we do? Yes, I would say, because we have bodies. And the bodies have evolved from lower forms, and they have all of those instincts and impulses.
Then ako idugang, no, nga ganina na mention niya nga basin daw ka ng evolution lang dayon. Trick lang, no? Kaning atong mga beliefs, kung sa mga free will ba, trick lang daw ni siya para ma-survive ta. Akong pangutana sa iya, nganong mo stop man nga ang kanang mga butanga trick lang. Dili ba pwede nga ang Ginoo may gihimuan ang nga nagpamagi, no? Para ma-explain nato, no? Ma-explain nato ang mga butang-butang. Gihimo sa Ginoo ni katong consciousness, atong free will, no? Ganong trick lang man, ganong evolution lang man, ganon dira man mo stop. So ambot lang og ma-explain ba na nila sa evolution, kay if gasunod sila ana nga kanang premise ng kanang evolution lang, then they'd have to accept kanang PSR or principles of sufficient reason. So kaning pangutana nga nangutana nga evolutionary drives ra ba bang nag-drive nato sa atong mga actions, or is there something more sa atong kinabuhi? Nakadepende ni sa pangutana kung tinuod or dili ba tinuod ang Ginoo gihapon. So padayon gyud ta.
I wouldn't deny that for a minute. I'm not a Platonist in that way. But I do think there's something that transcends the merely animal dimension of our life. And it's revealed in things like Hamlet and things like our ultimate concern and our quest, not just for a particular beautiful thing, but for the source of beauty. And that's that very interesting moment. It's James Joyce in A Portrait of the Artist when he's that famous scene looking out at the woman who would eventually be his wife. And he describes her in this rapturous way. And when she turns to look at him, and then he says, "Oh, heavenly God." And that's the move from Plato through Dante up to James Joyce and many others, that through the particular beautiful thing, I'm triggered into an awareness of the source of beauty, the beauty that I'm seeking implicitly in every particular beautiful thing. Or, when you grasp a mathematical relationship and it's so powerful to you, and the truth of it is not just the evanescent truth of, well, that thing is in front of me right now. It's you've grasped something that's true in any possible world, that's true at any place or time. That triggers an awareness of the source of truth. So that's how I think it works in a religious consciousness. But I go back to Plato with that intuition.
It's interesting how you characterize the position as being
Mo to no nga, sama sa akong giingon ba nga, murag nahulog nga gihunong niya ang explanation taman sa evolutionary drives, pero nalimot siya og pangutana nga why does that have to happen at all, no? Nganong na may evolutionary drives, no? Nga gastretch na siya mga explanation nga mo explain nga natay mga actions nga atong ginabuhat, ibalik niya sa evolutionary drives, and yet dili siya willing nga i-question po na nga reason, no? I-question po na iyang gihatag nga tubag nga man ka ng evolutionary drives, no? Kay tanang butang nag-exist for a reason. Contingent siya sa usa ka laing butang, no? So nakadepende ang iyang existence sa laing butang. Ang evolutionary drive wala gyapon na siya nabutang dira unless nga naay necessary nga nakapabutang niya diha. So padayon ta.
reductionist. I share your intuition that something like Hamlet, the idea that the production of it could be reduced to apes trying to survive, seems incredible. But the two things I would say in response to that is, firstly, this is true of all evolutionary biology, and that I might talk about some minute facet of my body, like my eyelashes or something. And the idea that the development of these particular hairs on the end of an eyelid somehow serve in the great survival of species on planet Earth, it seems so absurd and disconnected. But actually, if you draw a long enough chain of reasoning as to why we ended up here, it can be explained in those terms. And also, you said a moment ago that all the...
So at least makita nato no nga na siya inclination nga tanang butang di ay kana nato na ay explanation, maski kung sa kataas na explanation, sama sa pilok na explanation nga na ang iyang rason na kay evolutionary drives, it can be explained with evolutionary drives. Sige, ato na accept karon. So natin mga pangutana unya nga mag-question anang pangutana hasad.
behaviors that we participate in are motivated in some way, they're moral in some way, and there's some kind of ultimate motivation. And you said that you would call this God or ground it in God, meaning that, you know, if I choose to read a book, or if I choose to get on a plane or go to the shop to buy some food, ultimately I'm being motivated by this religious structure. And in the same way that you say it seems absurd that Hamlet can be reduced to evolutionary biology, I might say, well, it seems absurd that me getting up and going to the shop and telling the guy to keep the change is inflatable to something like a religious structure. But I think you would say that, although that seems a little strange upon first hearing, there is a chain there that does ultimately is ultimately fully explained by religion. In the same way, maybe something like Hamlet and the immense awe that human beings feel upon looking upon their loves or upon understanding the universality of mathematics is rather, you know, depressingly, but perhaps just a very long offshoot of this struggle for survival.
Well, let's play with it for a little bit. I mean, might you trace origins of these ideas back that way? Possibly. But the experience of the idea itself in its full expression that's where I'm balking to say, well, I'm going to sort of thereby debunk it and say, well, it's really nothing but now fill in the blank, you know.
Ug usa pod ana ba nga kanang daghan king rason nga nung dili lang evolutionary drives ang kanang gakahitabo sa atong mga decision. For example, kanang atong pagaganahan og music, no? Aron sa any reason nga kuan nga a creature, no, ganahag music, no, para sa iyang survival. Actually wala tay reason nga nung ma-incline tag music. Nganong ganahan man ta ana. For example, why would we feel nganong maka-feel man tag reward, no, when mutabang taglaing tao, no? Mo rason ta nga pwede ta mo rason nga kung tabangan nato siya kuan kanang basin makatabang siya. Pero what if kani nga sitwasyon? What if ang usa ka dato nga tawo muhatag sa usa ka buta, bungol, stranger nga pobre nga tawo? Nganong makabati man siya great ug lasting happiness kumpara sa great nga happiness nga kanang maski pag walay makakita ba, nganong maka-feel siya great nga happiness kumpara kung mutabang ka nga nay makakita nimo. Ngano man na nga uya, if evolution lang na siya tanan, nganong kailangan man mo evolve nga nay kwan ba, nay difference ang atong happiness nga madawat kung makakita ang laing tawo ug wala, no? Nganong na-implant sa atong pagkatawo nga mas rewarding ang pagtabang nga way makakita. So nga na mo ni mga butang nga dili ma-explain sa evolutionary drives kung ang imong gituohan ana niya anang theory kay ang atong mga actions, no, ang kaning mga maayo nga atong mga buhat is a result of evolutionary drives. Kay wala gyud sense nganong maganahan tag music, for example, search for meaning, no? Ang evolution wala galik ang atong kanang evolution wala siya wala gi-require ba? Wala na siya gi-require nga natay consciousness para mo survive. Nga there is no need to have consciousness para mo survive. Ang mga animals walay consciousness but they survive. Ngayon sila nga to escape death. Puntan-on na tugbalik nga. Is there really a need to escape death? No? Nga ang least nga imong kinahanglan sa evolution kung kana imong gituohan na nga ang evolution necessary para mo adapt. So kung ingana manggaling nga nagkinahanglan unta dapat nga ug rason nga nganong naatay consciousness. Pero walay enough reason ang tawo para mo evolve ug ingana. Okay. So magpadayon ta.
We're bodies. We come up from the earth and we come up from these deeper, animal instincts and all that. I don't deny that. But I don't think you believe for a second that when you're entertaining some really high level mathematics, even though the ultimate origin we could trace even, biologically backward, that in itself it's reducible to a mere concern for survival. That something's opened up there that transcends that dimension. And that, again, that's Plato escaping from the cave, that you've moved to a higher level of consciousness. I just balk at the reductionism because I think it mocks the truth of that experience. So bracket religion for a second, just aesthetic experiences or epistemic experiences or really profound moral experiences. When you see someone like a Maximilian Kolbe, an act of extraordinary saintly heroism in the moral order, and you say, that's explicable in an evolutionary terms. I mean, I just don't buy it. I think something has opened up that mocks that kind of reductionism.
I mean, it's
Explain
a strong intuition.
Kolbe. Maximilian Kolbe, who gave his life in Auschwitz. He was not chosen by the Nazis. They chose 10 people at random to die because someone escaped from the barracks. Kolbe came forward because there was a man that got to his knees and said, I have a wife and children. And so Kolbe came forward and said, I'm a Catholic priest, take me. And so the Nazis happily took him and then starved him to death. So he's one of the great martyr saints of the 20th century. I would submit to you, it's impossible to explain that on simply like evolutionary grounds or some variation of the survival instinct. I mean, I think that mocks the moral splendor of that act. And I think there's something that's concomitant in the epistemic and the aesthetic order too.
Sama sa akong na storya ganina no nga ang humans yun nagyo tendency to search for kuan kana mo appreciate og beauty ba, and survival does not require that. Nga ingana nga maganahan tag music wala naga-require para sa tong survival, no? Niya maski pag ibutang ta lang nga random na siya nga sana nga evolution nga kanang appreciation to beautiful things random, no? Nga kita nga mga tao nga naka-experience ana makaingon lang banta nga wala ng music nga tong experience, no? Then ang question pa yun nga ngano mang naa may butang in the first place nga pwede na to i-appreciate, no? Nga nganong kailangan pa man ta mo evolve nga maka-appreciate tag butang nga wala man dira sa sinugdanan. For example, music, no? Ang music gi-create na sa tawo. Umiingon sila nga ang appreciation for music ikan sa evolution. Nganong mo evolve man ta para mo create og something nga wala man na nag-exist sa una, no? Kanang music ba? So usa na siya ka beautiful thing nga humans tawag dili ta animals, no? So kuan unsa pa? Ang evolutionary drive pod dili po niya ma-explaining atong quest as humans, no? Kani nga quest nga mangitag tubag ba? The fact nga makapangutana ta ani nga mga pangutana nga dili mo tani kinahanglan sa survival is the reason nga nganong evolutionary drives nga ang evolutionary drives dili tanan, no? There must be something beyond that for us to be having these questions, no? Mas maayo pa nga wala ta ani nga questions para mo survive kay if ang conclusion nga atong magain ani day kay is a sad explanation nga tungod lang kay gusto ang atong species sa atong subconscious evolutionary drive nga mo escape sa death, no? Mo evolve ta nga makapangutana ani nga mga questions. It's depressing, no? The fact that nga naay alternative nga conclusion, no? Nga atong mahatag ana nga ang alternative conclusion is to find meaning, no? To find God. Mo nang alternative nato nga conclusion ana ani nga butanga nga phenomenon nga parening phenomenon sa consciousness. Kuan ba kanang gwapo kayo siya nga evolutionary nga drive kung kana ang explanation atong evolutionary nga phenomenon kung kana ang atong pilion nga conclusion. Pero kuan ug lantawon po nato ang evolutionary drive sa mata nga iyang gi-present, no? Sa iyang perspective nga iyang gi-present nga kinahanglan nato na para mo survive dapat unta nga ang atong rason sa pag-evolve dapat nasa physical realm. Ngano man nga mo go out of limb lang yung taghatag og reason nga gusto ta mo escape og death mo nang mag-create og religion. Layo na kay sa tinuod nganong mangita man kasawala nga naa man tay physical world kung evolution lang ha kung walay Ginoo. So it does not make sense no nay disconnect sa theory nga iyang gihatag. Dayon kuan. No, the only reason, no, nga nganong ang consciousness is necessary for humans, nganong nahimo siya og necessary for humans is para to perceive something that is immaterial, no? Nga di mo nato na malimod moral truths, numbers, no? Unsa pa laing mga immaterial consciousness. Nganong makabalo man ta ana. Kay naaday kanang natay capability to perceive that it's a good thing nga makasurvive ta ana. Usa pa gyud ana nga ma-perceive na to is God, no? Then ang kanang consciousness itself og evolutionary drive na wala ganid atong species, no? Walay creature nga ganid ana if ang conclusion nga ma-arrive ana nga species is walay pulos, no? So usa sa mga human quest nato ang atong murag kanang unsay pulos nato is kanang mangita ta explanations kung nganong nag-exista, no? Nganong kailangan ta mo survive. So nganong tubagon man na sa evolution. Kung muhunong ta sa pangutana nga evolution drives, wala mapakyas ning mga pangutanaha. Kay capable gud ta nga mangutana ani nga mga pangutana. So it needs an answer. It screams for an answer. So ngano man nga ang atong instincts morally good, no? We feel kanang reward when we do good. Ug nganong inclined ta og kindness, especially sa mga mananap nga di mo nakasukli unta nato, no? Nga sa bisag aha nga kultura panimulan tawon, mag-care tag animals nga nata inclinations to care for the animals ba. Pero wala man ta na ikatabang sa atong pagkatawo. And even napay ka ng explanation na wala na nagtubag sa ubang mga questions nga naa nato. Dayon source of beauty sa music, sa pattern, sa sequence, no? Wala tay kuan na di nganong ang atong pagkatawo, nganong evolution ka scream man nga mangita ta og tubag anang mga butanga. Dayon. So padayon ta.
Do you think it's truly impossible? I mean, I understand that it's depressing and potentially insulting, as you suggest there with the term mocking, to reduce such an act of heroism to biological drives. But I think that people interested in this line of thought are essentially trying to explain a phenomena. They're saying we have this phenomena of these animals that decide to sacrifice themselves for each other. And somebody comes along and says, well, look, I mean, in the evolution of mankind, people share their genes. You know, if somebody is an adult, they might sacrifice themselves easily for their children on an evolutionary ground. It's so easy to see evolutionarily why it would be that a father would sacrifice himself for his children, especially if the father isn't going to have any more kids. On a purely survival of the genes approach, it's the most straightforward thing in the world to see why that would be the case. Similarly, you can see why it might happen for a brother or a cousin, and you can expand this to strangers who share some genetics
But
in
see
the
how
human
you're
race.
stretching
Oh,
that so thin.
Ga-stretch na siya ayo ba sa iyang reasoning nga na evolutionary drives lagi tanan nga ang pag-sacrifice sa man kanang makita daw, no? Pero base nalimot siya nga for over 2,000 years na Kristyanismo. And if kabalo ka sa tinudluan sa Kristyanismo, ang giingon dira nga higugmaon ang imong kaaway. People have been doing that for at least, no? Wala pay labot ang Jewish tradition nga. I also believe nga ila po ning ginabuhat nga kanang love your enemies. Christians have been expressing those things for 2,000 for thousands of years, no? Then if dili pa na siya maayo sa survival sa mga Christianity, nganong wala pa man minawala, no? Nganong man nga ang kaning kaayong ipakita na mo sa mga kaaway, which is wala mo tay maikadulot na mog survival, no? Wala mo tay kanang kaayo unta. Ngano man nga ginabuhat na mo ni. Kung naka-explanation na ambot na lang unsa nga matubag ba nimo na kanang evolutionary drives lang.
No, I mean, you're beginning with something, as you say, is somewhat credible, intelligible, but now you're stretching it to reach someone like Kolbe to understand his act of self-sacrifice that way. I just don't buy it. I mean, I get it. I've read the arguments that
Yeah.
but I just don't think it honors the integrity of what's happening there. You know,
But this is why I wanted to bring this up in this way, is to say that
yeah,
that first step of saying, well, the father sacrifices himself for his son or his children, let's say, and somebody comes along and says, I think this can be explained in terms of the survival of genes. I don't think it would be appropriate to say, well, you're mocking the sacrifice, or you're diminishing the sacrifice, or you're ruining the moral import of that sacrifice. I think all they're doing is explaining it. And so, be it we may be sort of stretching things a bit more thinly, but the terminology that you used of trying to explain such a sacrifice by reference to the survival of genes being first impossible. You said, I think it's just impossible to describe it in these terms, and second, that it mocks the moral sacrifice. If it doesn't do it in the first case of the father sacrificing himself for the children, why would it do it in the latter?
because you've stretched that string so tight at that point. I mean, I think you've
Fine, no? Ibutang talanga ang kanang kayo nga itong gihimo kay evolutionary drives, no? For survival. Ibutang talanga, tanan-tanang actions to is kanang nakabase sa evolution. Ang pangutana di haron nga ngano ang evolution has to work that way, man. And why does the world need to have an evolution at all, no? We know its existence, na evolution man gyud, dili nato na ma-deny. Pero nganong naaman, unsa may hinungdan nganong naay evolution. If there is no God, then it's your burden kay ikaw may nagdalaan nga topic nga evolutionary drives, then you must be able to explain nga ngano nga na may evolution.
you've not honored that a quantum has been crossed. There's something new that's emerged within human experience that can't just be reduced to a physical impulse. It's on a spectrum, obviously, because I would say both visible and invisible, both body and soul, and there's elements that we can explain through recourse to material causality. But then others, I just think a quantum has been crossed. And I always just sort of laugh. That's why I use the Hamlet example, that it just seems so ludicrous to me to say that that's understandable utterly. I mean, maybe in certain respects or in the beginning of the analysis or something, but that utterly Hamlet's explicable in terms of evolutionary principles strikes me as ludicrous. And the same with high moral acts like the Kolbe Act or, in any of the three basic orders.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why you think it would be stretching an explanation thin, but I mean, as you say, you're familiar with. I mean, there's a wealth of literature and a wealth of generally scientists, I think, are of this view. When you hear people talking about reducing morality to evolutionary drives, it's often a scientist rather than a philosopher who's talking about it. But this is a view that's held, and it's a view that's quite popular, certainly among secular scientists and philosophers. I was just surprised to hear you so flatly describe it as impossible.
No, I didn't say impossible.
describe this
I
kind of-
said the beginnings of the analysis might participate at that level, but I think a quantum is crossed at some point where that becomes ludicrously inadequate as an explanation. So I don't think you believe that. Whenever I talk to people or dialogue with people who are defending that position, I don't honestly think you believe that Hamlet or Maximilian Kolbe or the Sistine ceiling is utterly explicable in terms of evolutionary impulses. I don't think you believe that, because to me that's such a ludicrous position to hold. And it's animated, let's be honest, by a scientism. It's not animated by like pure objective science. It's by the assumption that reality must be reducible to the physical. So I'm going to make this finally ludicrous claim that these very high spiritual and moral values are purely explicable in terms of their evolutionary foundations. I mean, I think it's motivated by a philosophical prejudice much more than objective science.
I mean, certainly I would hesitate to recommend that people assume that let's say a materialistic explanation ought always be favored. There's this idea, which I think is what you're describing as scientism here, that should there be a materialistic hypothesis, there should be some kind of bias or some kind of some kind of automatic leaning towards that explanation over a non-material explanation.
So muna akong giingon guys no nga ang pagtuo ng butanga nga ang tanan nagbase ra sa evolutionary drives is actually harmful for us, no? And if it's harmful for us, then what is evolution doing to us, no? So kadaot day. And mo lagi na nga do ka conclusions ni mo nga ma-arrive ana mo pili ka og katubang dautan nga may kahatag urang maayo nga ikahatag ana which is maglin siya sa religion, no? Or sa kanang belief in God. Reasonable siya as we know kay ang tanang butang nagsugod og naisinugdanan, no? Everything has a kanang is contingent, no? Everything is contingent sa laing butang pod na ay rason ang usa ka butang nga exist because na siya rason, no? So it all goes back to a single creator which we call God. So next.
I don't think we should do that. I think that explaining human action in terms of an ultimate sense of spirituality and belief in God is a powerful explanation. I also do think that explaining human action.
So anyways guys, so dito na tapos atong segment, no. I hope nga nalingaw mo og namoy nakatunan. And if you wanna check out Alex O'Connor, you can find him sa iyang channel. Sa iyang channel sa YouTube, which is where's that? I think it's Alex Connor. You can search that on YouTube, no? Og si pod i-check niyo si Bishop Barron, daghan mo makatunan niya din, especially if na mo chance nga makapalit og Bible atong Word on Fire. Please buy that Bible kay actually daghan jud siya explanations dito, no? And I'm planning to buy that one. Ang ako nakitaan sa YouTube kay mga reviews ba kung sa siya klase nga Bible, and I'm really interested kung unsa pay naa dito nga wala sa uban. And it is broken down into 4 volumes man siguro sa akong pagkahinumdum. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to support me, please like, share ug subscribe, no, kung ahaman ako ni ma-post kay mo pa ni ang first na ko nga ga-review og usa ka discussion may tungod sa ingani lagi. So I hope you continue to support me. Then comment lang mo og namoy kanang gusto nga i-change or may ka-advice kung saan ako ni pagdala ning nga mga videos, na open-minded ko sa inyong sa inyong mga comments. And thank you and God bless.